Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam wa ala Rasulillah. Just having some brief thoughts, past couple of days with regards to accountability and reparations. And one of the things, or many of the things that we've learned when the issue of reparations comes up is the issue of the latter generations not being held accountable for the actions of the past generations, right? So this is one of the big arguments with regards to should people get reparations or not, right? The issue of righting a past wrong does not come into play. It's one of the problems when dealing with the issue of reparations. But one thing that I wanted to look at is the country Germany, right? Now, Germany is in the process of paying reparations to the Jewish community in Israel. This is what they're doing. And they've also taken the steps to prevent things of this nature from happening again. For example, one of the things that the German government is doing and has done is they have made wearing Nazi apparel or the utilization of Nazi symbols against the law. So you can't wear swastikas in public in Germany. You can't wear your lightning bolts in Germany. You can't wear the clothing of the people from the Nazi Party in Germany. These are steps that they've taken. And they also teach in school that they were wrong. The practice of what the Germans did under Hitler, the Nazis, they were wrong. They teach this in their schools in Germany, right? This is taking an account, being accountable for the past, right? Even though the future generation didn't commit the atrocities, it happened in Germany. So therefore, they feel and felt that it was upon them to not repeat the sins of the past that their forefathers committed. So they teach it in schools. They teach the Holocaust in schools. And they also recognize that their people, who were the Nazis of the time, they were wrong, right? So we find the school system teaches about the Holocaust. We also find that it's against the law in Germany to wear swastikas. You can't even wear a t-shirt with Hitler on it. Matter of fact, you can't even make the Heil Hitler signs. You can't do none of that. And the police, they're not having that. They're not having it. You understand what I'm saying? So Germany has taken their country to account for what happened during the Holocaust, right? And they are paying reparations. Now, the question is this: why are they paying reparations? They're paying reparations because they know that their countrymen in the past did a great wrong, and that wrong needs to be right, right? That wrong needs to be made right. This is the conclusion that they've come to. Not only that, but when we look at the immigrants to Germany, right? The immigrants, right? Germany has a large Turkish population. Germany has a large Moroccan population. Germany has a pretty decent American population, particularly individuals who were in the military and got out of the military and chose to remain in Germany. These individuals are German citizens, many of them. So, these individuals who are now German citizens, the Somalis and the likes, they have to pay reparations. Now, many may say, well, look, why should we pay reparations for something that happened in the past and we weren't citizens of that country? And to the Germans, it's simple. We have to right a wrong, and since you are a citizen of this country, guess what? Your dollars, your tax dollars are going to what? It's going to help us pay these reparations. This is the price that you pay of becoming a citizen. You take on the debt of the nation that you are now a citizen of. So these are points that Germany has made with regards to righting a wrong, right? Now, in America, it's no different, right? In America, there's no different. We hear those who say, well, you know, people shouldn't have to pay reparations for something that happened a long time ago, or the descendants of those people shouldn't have to pay because it happened so long ago. We shouldn't be held accountable. But let's keep in mind this. In America, you're from a city or a town, and say, I'm in Durham, North Carolina, right? So the police does something that's not correct. It's not correct. And because of the police action, there's a lawsuit. So the person who sued the police department basically sued the city. And so now they have been awarded, let's say $800,000, right? Where does this $800,000 come from? Matter of fact, all the lawsuits in various cities and towns due to inappropriate behavior of police officers or anyone else, government officials, whatever the case may be, where does the money come from to pay for the wrongs that individuals have done? Comes from taxpayers. Comes from taxpayers. So the question is this: is it okay for a town or city to pay for the wrongs of representatives of the town and the city? Then you will say no. But in many cases, what do we find? Taxpayers have to pay. They have to pay. Why? Because the city has to be accountable for the actions of those who represent it. This is a reality. So likewise, it's easy for us to say, okay, well, we're going to hold the city accountable, but we can't hold the country accountable. So just some thoughts, as we think about, the issue of accountability and the issue of reparations, right? So it's okay for a city or a town to pay reparations for its wrongs, but it's not okay for a country to pay for the reparations of its wrongs. This is what you're saying to me. So these are things that, we have to be aware of and be cognizant of how people view things. And we have to be able to look at the overall system and say, okay, well, you allowed it here, but you don't allow it here. For example, what's information been floating around lately, the family members who were separated during the Trump administration, right? Those families are possibly going to get $450,000 each, right? For being separated, each family. at the border, when the people were trying to cross. And so to pay for that wrong, Biden was in secret meetings to discuss how much these people should get. But now African Americans, many of the African American scholars and activists, they were like, hey man, look, you guys want to pay for the wrongs for the past administration. Okay, that's fine, but you haven't even paid your debt to African Americans yet. You still owe us a debt. So, again, we find what? It's okay to pay for the wrongs when it comes to who? Others. As opposed to paying for the wrongs that occurred to African Americans. These are the dichotomies that this government find themselves in, right? And so I say, me personally, I say, keep the pressure on them. Keep the pressure on the government. Keep the pressure on them. Don't give them no quarter. You gave the Japanese reparations, right? Now you're giving the people who were separated from their children, you're giving them reparations. You're trying to right a wrong, right? So, again, if you're going to right a wrong, then right the wrong of your original wrong. And that is reparations for the African Americans. So those who have the argument that, hey, look, man, that was a long time ago. This generation shouldn't pay for the past. We say, yeah, you sound good, but you don't say that when it comes to things that happen in a city where everyone's tax dollars goes to pay for that wrong that was done. You're quiet about that, right? You're quiet about that. Rodney King, when he was beat in LA, the millions he was paid, where did the money come from? It came from the taxpayers. Black, white, Mexican, like this. And everyone else who lives in LA. That's where it came from. That's where the money came from. So, again, everyone who lives in LA didn't have anything to do with the Rodney King beating. No, the police officers beat Rodney King the way that they beat him. So why should everyone else have to pay? And we can make that same argument when it comes to reparations. Now, this $450,000 that I mentioned that's going to be paid possibly to immigrants that was trying to come in, right? Where's this money coming from? It's coming from taxpayers, right? Taxes that who pays? Not just American citizens, but African Americans, right? Go figure, right? So African American tax dollars is going to also help pay for what? The wrongs that was committed to those immigrant families, right? But yet, you can't give African Americans reparations, right? You don't want to be accountable when it comes to African Americans, but you are accountable when it comes to everyone else. So these were just some brief thoughts, man, that I was having with regards to reparations, man, and looking at reparations that were paid in the past and reparations that are being paid now, and the dichotomy of the whole issue. This has been a huge dichotomy. So, again, to those who are pushing for reparations, keep it hot on them. Keep it hot. Give them no quarter. Keep it hot on them. And let them know about their hypocrisy. Keep it hot. Don't let up. Because it's owed. It's been owed. In the words of Mirza Baradaran, in her book, The Color of Money, and Black Banks and the Wealth Gap. You know, the first chapter of that book, she mentions the title of the chapter, a bank account instead of 40 acres and a mule, right? Because you're supposed to got 40 acres and a mule, right? And the lands of the Southerners who lost, their lands were forfeit. They lost. So land was supposed to have been designated for many of the African Americans so that they could take care of themselves. That's all they needed was land to take care of themselves. And they could build themselves up. And African Americans have always proven that they can build themselves up, right? So what did Andrew Johnson do? The 17th president, what did he do? He reneged, right? He reneged. That's the start of the reneging on black people. Then he has the audacity to say that black people need to build themselves, while at the same time making preparation to give who? Poor whites land, right? Out west, right? That was in the process, right? So he made it clear that he was going to look out for whites. And you can find this in various books of history. You won't find it in your school textbooks. You can forget that. But in various books of history, you'll find it. Various books of economics dealing with reparations and the likes and banking and the likes, you'll find it, right? So what did they give African Americans right after slavery, Reconstruction? They gave them a bank, right? The Freedmen's Bank, so that they could deposit their hard-earned money into the banks, right? Into that Freedmen's Bank. And what happened? The Freedmen's Bank accumulated millions. I'm talking about back then, which would be billions today. I forget the number. But for a source on that, the book that I just named, The Color of Money, right? Black Banks and Wealth Gap by Mirza Baradar. It's the first chapter. So African Americans saved all this money while being what? While being back in legal slavery, right? Because they put African Americans back in slavery. It was legal. And for a source on that, check out Slavery by Another Name by Black, Dr. Black. This book, tremendous book. And I think you can find on YouTube a documentary based on that book. Slavery by Another Name is the name. And it talks about peonage, right? Which basically that's what the sharecropping was. The convict leasing program, right? Because they utilized the 13th Amendment. If you incarcerate, slavery is abolished except when what? You're incarcerated, right? So they came up with all kinds of crazy laws, right? To lock African American men up, right? And they put them back in slavery, right? So in saying that, you had peonage, convict leasing, and then the Jim Crow, right? Which lasted another 100 years, right? So now you have the issue of reparations for slavery. Now, tack on reparations for what? Jim Crow and legal slavery, meaning peonage and convict leasing, right? So tack that on too. And right after that, we had successful towns and cities, right? Some were destroyed physically, like Tulsa, which was probably the most lucrative black area. The area of Greenwood was probably the most lucrative among black areas in the United States. Destroyed. Add that to the reparations. Then we have Durham, where I'm at, Durham, North Carolina. Black Wall Street in Durham. All the way to Haiti. And Haiti, it took its name after Haiti. Like, you know, the country Haiti, took its name from that. So what they did, they basically built a highway running right in the middle of it, right? They called it urban renewal, right? Urban renewal. So they split the neighborhood up. They basically divided it, right? And this led to the fall of Black Wall Street in Durham, right? But these two were the most lucrative cities for blacks in the United States at the times that they were in. And that has been decimated. Add that to reparations as well. Not to mention that Freedmen's Bank that I was telling you about, the people who were behind it, they got involved in risky investments. One of the risky investments that they got into was investing in the railroads. It tanked. So that was money from the African Americans that was wasted. Money for the African Americans that was wasted. And then the bank, the Freedmen's Bank, eventually went under. It eventually went under. And that money, all that money that the African Americans put in, because they was dreaming about owning their own home, owning their own land, they got played. Add that to reparations as well. Add that as well. You know, so the government knows that it owes a great deal. And they don't seem to be quick to right this wrong. They don't seem to be quick to right this wrong, right? Because they've done so much and they continue to do, right? Because if you want to be technical about it, we can add to reparations as well. Your blockbusting that you was doing, right? Blockbusting is when you keep people from moving into a certain area, right? You keep people from moving into a certain area by spreading information such as the property value will go down. So they will scare whites into saying, look, if you allow these Negroes to come in, your property value will go down, right? And so the whites in the area, well, they will be in a panic. They want their property value to go down. I already don't want to be around blacks. And then the property value going to go down as a result of being around blacks. I don't want anything to do with that, right? So what they did, the banks, as well as the politicians, they did this blockbusting. This was one aspect of blockbusting. Another aspect of blockbusting was they would pay African Americans to walk through a white neighborhood, looking at houses, looking at homes. And if there was a home that was empty, they would have African Americans look at it. This would put the whites on edge, right? This would put the whites on edge. And the sad part about it is because they utilized racial tension at that time, what they did was they would actually sell homes to African Americans for double the price, right? While simultaneously build a new development for whites to escape to. And they would charge them double. So they're quadrupling their money, right? FHA and the likes. They're quadrupling their money, right? This was the blockbusting system at the time, right? So not only you had to right the wrong of the past things that I mentioned, now you got to right the wrong of blockbusting, right? You have to right the wrong of what? Of African Americans not being able to participate in the New Deal, right? That was brought into effect by FDR, right? Franklin D. Roosevelt, right? Add that, because this created this strong middle class that we see here in the United States today. African Americans were locked out of that. Good sources to read on that was the book that I just mentioned also. The Color of Money, Also, she wrote another book called How the Other Half Banks, both books by Mirza Baradaran, as well as The Color of Law by Dr. Richard Rothstein, and the book When Affirmative Action Was White by Ira Katz Nelson, right? These are great sources to read on the issue of blockbusting, right? Redlining, and the issue of the New Deal. Tremendous works to study. The housing market, tremendous works to study. And there are other works. But for the sake of brevity, excuse me 1 minute. For the sake of brevity, I won't mention all those sources. But at any rate, these are things that you can add on to the reparation. These things played a role in African Americans being locked out of economics. And this is an issue that the United States has to contend with. These are issues the United States is going to have to contend with, as well as the issue of what? Gentrification, right? Taking the neighborhoods that people are in. This is an issue, right? Making the taxes go up for people who own their homes in their neighborhood because people want to come in, they see that area as wealthy. So these are things I want. Okay. So these are things, sorry about that. So these are things that they're going to have to take into account with regards to that. All the wrongs that they have done. You can add all of that up to slavery, the legal slavery, the illegal slavery, right? Because slavery was legal in this country. Then they made it legal again through what? Peonage and convict leasing. All these things they're going to have to take into account. And those activists who are pushing for reparations, they need to bring all of this up. Even gentrification today, they need to bring all of it up. They need to bring up the issue of blockbusting. They need to bring up the issue of racial covenants, right? Racial covenants was a covenant that whites made with each other, written or not written. That is, they wouldn't sell their homes or they wouldn't rent their homes to Negroes or Mexicans like this. Okay. Sorry about that. So these are issues that they're going to have to come to grips with. They're going to have to delve into these realities, right? So right now, according to some, reparations is in the trillions. Allah knows best, but this is a right that they're going to have to wrong, and they're going to have to look at Germany. To right that wrong, because Germany is doing their job. Germany wants to make amends for the past. Until America does that, then it's going to be what it's going to be. And this is a huge issue in the United States with regards to white supremacy. They do not want to recognize their wrong. And this is an issue we got to call them to task on. We do it scholastically. We can do it legally. I take the position, hit them on all fronts. Leave no corner, right? If you're good at economics and you want to come at it from an economic standpoint, boom. You get with other people who want to come at it from an economic standpoint. If you want to come at it from the standpoint of law, you get with those people who come at it from the standpoint of law. But now each person that takes a different approach doesn't mean that they can't work together with people of different approaches. We're going to hit them this way. You're going to hit them that way, right? When you do a cell extraction, right? In the prison, they do a cell extraction, right? Have an individual that holds the shield, individual that gets a leg, another individual gets a leg, other individual gets a leg, other individual gets a leg. You get them from all angles. So until we take these approaches like this, then we will be scattered. So these are things we have to work on. And these were just some thoughts with regards to that. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.